Good afternoon. I'm Chris Scher, Member Communications Director of the Society of Broadcast Engineers and the co-host of this month's episode of the SBE WEBxtra, the SBE chapter of the Web. This is a monthly SBE meeting, usually held on the third Monday of the month. The SBE is the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals, with more than 4,500 members, mostly in the U.S., but also around the world. The host of today's SBE WEBxtra is SBE Treasurer and Social Networking Committee Chair Kevin Trueblood. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Chris, thanks for being here this afternoon. It is a wonderful occasion to celebrate today as we recognize our new SBE Fellow, Steve Brown. We're going to get a chance to talk to him for a little bit and get to know about his very long-running career with Woodward Broadcast Groups based in Appleton, Wisconsin. So we're going to talk to him in just a few minutes. You can also, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can leave us a comment and participate if you want to throw some virtual tomatoes or write some very nice things about Steve. We'd love to hear from you as well. You can comment right there on the YouTube page. So we'll talk to Steve in just a few minutes. But first, Chris, we'll get a little bit of business to take care of first.
Yes, we have your SBE member update for May 15th, 2023. There are 2 webinars by SBE on the calendar for May. Actually, one is past us, I just realized. It's on May 11th, the SBE RF Safety course returned. It was the 2023 update. Stephen Lockwood always does a fantastic job. You can catch that one on demand at the SBE website. But coming up on May 25th, the SBE presents Where is Mobile Video Headed and How Do You Handle It? It's led by Latitude broadcast specialist Tom Moronis. The webinar looks at ways to use the portal tool we all carry, a cell phone, to capture quality audio and video. You can access the entire library of webinars by SBE presentations on demand. For information on these and all of them, go to Webinars by SBE at sbe.org/webinars. The next chapter exam window is in June. The application date for those exams is closed. After that, there's a local chapter exam window in August for SBE certification. The application deadline is June 16. And if you don't want to wait, or if a local chapter exam is not convenient for you, or just not possible because of in-person restrictions, private proctoring is available. For more information on SBE certification, it's all online, sbe.org/certification. The annual SBE membership drive began March 1st. The theme this year is The SBE and You, the Perfect Fit. Recruit a new SBE member from March 1st to May 31st, and you not only help grow the society, you can earn a discount on your 2024 dues, and you'll be entered into the prize drawing. Prizes range from shirts and hats to gift cards to broadcast equipment. The grand prize is a paid trip to the SBE National Meeting in September in Columbus, Ohio. You can get all the details at sbe.org/drive. Also, the 2023 SBE Compensation Survey is still open for a few more days, and we need your input. It only takes a few minutes, and all the responses remain anonymous. Take the survey at sbe.org/survey. And that is your SBE member update for May 15th, 2023. Turn it back over to SBE Treasurer and Social Networking Committee Chair Kevin Trueblood. Kevin?
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I'm excited today to talk to one of now 88 individuals who have been named as an SBE Fellow, and this is a very distinguished honor that recognizes the conspicuous service or the valuable contributions to the advancement of broadcast engineering or its allied professions. I think our guest definitely exudes that. He's held a long career that began back in 1975. He's also been on the SBE Board of Directors. He's also been part of the Wisconsin Broadcasters Clinic, and most notably, and certainly not last but least, a good friend, Steve Brown. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, and congratulations on becoming the latest SBE Fellow, and wanted to kind of get to know you a little bit. Now, if anybody's been to the Broadcasters Clinic or has set foot in the great state of Wisconsin, they are certainly familiar with you, but maybe outside of those circles, maybe the name's familiar, but I guess tell us a little bit about your career, because reading your biography, I think the thing that stands out to me the most is through your entire career, you've pretty much worked for the same stations in the same group for pretty much the entirety of it, which is a rarity these days.
Almost all of it, Kevin, and that's, I guess, a great privilege. I've had a few chances to go elsewhere, and thought about it very carefully, but in the end, either for professional or personal reasons, it always seemed to be the right choice to stay. And I'm fortunate. It's a great company, family-owned company, and now employee stock ownership company. And for me, just been a great home to have a great career.
So you started like a lot of us as a part-time announcer. Do we still have air checks in existence of your on-air days?
Oh, I had a few, I think, that weren't from the first years, but they were pretty close to the first years. And yes, they're appropriately embarrassing.
I was going to say, did you ever get the itch to actually be on the air again, or did you kind of leave all that behind to pursue engineering?
I would say I left most of that behind. I did that for the first maybe 5 or 6 years of broadcasting. For a while, I was the assistant chief engineer and a part-time announcer, so that they could make me full-time, which was, I guess, a great gift for me because that gave me the ability to have benefits and a full-time income, which not everyone that was in my situation had that privilege.
So for a lot of engineers, we kind of, I guess that old joke's been going around that we have the knack, that we grow up, we tinker with electronics and we know how to fix things before we actually become engineers. Was that the case for you, or did you kind of fall into engineering after you got into the industry?
Well, I was debating whether I should share this because it sounds a little bit like, well, first there was the log cabin story, but I do have to say this because I have my mom to thank. I had an interest in electronics. My dad and I talked about it, and I told him I wanted to be an electrician. And he said, no, you want to be an engineer. You want to be the guy who decides how the wires are put in, not just the guy putting the wires in. And that stuck with me in my sort of sixth grade mind, right? And then I started lugging home uh, televisions and radio sets from the curb. And given that this was the late 60s, early 70s, these were the old console tube radios that everyone is in love with now. But my basement got full of those pretty soon, and my dad really rued the day that he encouraged me. But my mom kind of held him off and said, hey, at least we know where he is. Let him down there playing with the glowing tubes. And that's probably what got me started. So,
Now, it didn't take long for you to move up to chief engineer. So, I guess, what excited you about actually getting behind the scenes? Because at the time, you just had what, the two radio stations that you were taking care of?
well, it seemed like it went in smaller steps to me, I guess, because first I um, got a job at the radio station sitting on the baseball games. Once an hour, I got to say, uh, this is WAPL-FM, Appleton. And then I sat for 59 and a half minutes, which a lot of us did that. But one day at high school, when I was, of course, seen by some as a bit of a nerd. I know you guys can't believe that. But one of the popular kids said to me, did I hear you on the radio this weekend? And of course, that set the hook, right? I mean, that's where it started. Um, and of course, I had the electronics experience, but at first was just announcing. Um, but then eventually, one of the engineers said, well, if you know a little something about this, maybe you could help me. And that's when it started. So um, I did that for probably 3 or 4 years, and we happened to be building a new radio facility at the time. I learned an awful lot in that process. The chief got a much better job in a major market after that happened, and they looked around and said, well, he seems to know a little bit what's going on. So they made me the acting chief engineer, and that was in 1981. So
So that was the case of getting thrown into the fire pretty much, where it's like, cool, now you figure it out, and you basically had to.
a little bit. I had great help from many friends and mentors, people in electronics in my local area, but also started to make friends with the other engineers in the market. And they were tremendously helpful. I'll always be grateful for them for not laughing me out of the room when I would ask some questions.
It's kind of astonishing. I know a lot of us have dealt with that. They call it now the imposter syndrome, where you think you know a lot of things, and then you talk to somebody else and realize you don't know anything. I mean, did that come up early on in your career?
Oh, I still have it today. But I mean, I think we all have to. In a business like this, you're always learning. And it's been interesting for me because I finally feel like I've been able to help some other people get started. And that's, I think, one of the things I'm really more proud of. But yes, I mean, you have to learn it every day because they invent this stuff faster than we can figure it out.
Oh, for sure. So tell us about some of those folks that you met early on, that the mentors and the people that trained you.
Well, I'm so afraid to do this, Kevin, because there are so many. And I'm afraid I'll forget someone. Although not everyone, of course, will see the SBE WEBxtra, but I do have to maybe blame the TV repairman that hired me when I was 14 years old, and he let me take parts out of televisions, and he paid me $1 a day to do that. And then I have to remember the guy who actually had the job of saying, "This is WAPL-FM Appleton." He went on to a real job, and then he's the one who gave me, I guess, the opportunity, introduced me to the person. Of course, they automatically hired me because they didn't know where to find anybody else that would take that job um, for $1.75 an hour. But it was then it was maybe the engineer at that station. Now you have to understand, in those days, this was the worst station in town, and that's why they had the baseball franchise because no one else would run it. Um,
This would have been the Brewers that you were
this
running,
was
or
the
was that?
Brewers at the time. They just brought the Brewers back to Milwaukee, and WAPL got the rights to run the games. Um, so this station was struggling, but it really was great working there because I got a chance to do almost every job. I don't think I ever did logs or the radio traffic department, but and I didn't sell, but I think I did just about every job, including a brief stint as program director when we switched WAPL to rock music, and that was fascinating. I think I
Well,
lasted
and
9 months.
APL, yeah, APL FM is pretty highly regarded as a great rock station across the country. So if you get to take home the honors of being the one who launched that, I think that's pretty amazing.
Oh, if I got the chance to tell some of those stories, the program or the
Well, we do have
operations
an hour to
manager.
fill, Steve.
Oh my gosh. The operations manager at the time, I think, trusted me because there were a lot of people maybe in the building more qualified to do that job. But I think I was in college at the time, and he said, "We'll have you do that job." So they gave me a princely sum to go to the record store and buy about 80 record albums, which I took home and auditioned and carefully marked all the cuts that we could play. And, the hardest part, I think, was for this 18-year-old kid to be in charge of announcers who were considerably older than I was and probably didn't have a great deal of respect for the fact that they made me the program director. But I learned a lot, and that was terrific. I was working late one night because I think no one else would work the shift, and a guy called the request line, "Oh, can you play this song by Yes?" And I said, "Well, I can't play that one, but I have this other one on this album." "I know you've got that one." It
So
was
at what point did you switch from being the program director and being the 18-year-old that marked all the records to actually then fixing the transmitter? Like, how did that transition happen?
so I was doing a little of that anyway. Again, we were fairly shorthanded at the station, but I believe I made it till I was 19 years old before I got fired as program director. I just came in one day and someone else was sitting at my desk. That's not happened to anybody in that job before. Um, but I then had to go out and find a job. And I auditioned at a number of radio stations and ended up getting a job at WHBY working weekend overnights. But I went from the worst station in town to the best station in town. And so had a chance to learn again. And one night I was on the air late at night. Of course, this is before pagers, and I'm at the Gatesway console. A lot of you guys might remember the Gatesway console, about a million 12 AXA 7s in about 36 inches of console. And I just watched the meter just slowly go down to zero, and there was silence. And so I called the engineer, and of course, no answer because he was out with his wife or whatever. And I was kind of all by myself. And I thought, well, what can I do? So I figured out how to patch the production room board on and got something going on the radio station. And then I couldn't go let the mystery go unsolved. So I had to figure out the Gatesway power supply, which didn't have a very tough problem, but you got to remember, I'm only about 20 years old at this point. I just took apart the power supply module and saw that the fuse holder had separated, and I put a few alligator clips in strategic places and hung a fuse out the front of the rack, put some chairs around with big warning danger high voltage signs out, fired up the console, and it worked. So I removed the patch and that went back to normal, finished the air shift and left a note for the engineer and didn't think anything of it. Um, and then the next Monday, the engineer calls me and says, well, I was afraid I was going to get hollered at, of course. But the engineer said, how would you like to come to work for me? So that's probably the time that I transitioned to becoming an actual member of the engineering department.
And the interesting thing is now being in your position for as long as you have, if you had some a weekend
Oh my
overnight
gosh.
announcer who did the same thing, you would be like, "Hey, you want a job?"
I would probably kill them first and then I'd give them a job. No, uh, it is funny thinking back to some of the things that I did later and some of the things I did earlier, but we won't talk about that.
Well, that's the whole point of starting your career like that because we've all made mistakes along in our career. And I know I can name a few that I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I didn't get fired for that, but here I am still today living to tell the tale. So that's a absolutely fascinating story to hear how you got into it because again for a lot of us being in the industry I much like you I kind of fell into engineering. I was kind of always a techie person. Like I would, fix people's clocks in my family, like whenever daylight savings time came. But I didn't think about it as a career until I kind of became the default engineer like you, and then realized that I like doing that more than doing the on-air side. So, at what point did you figure that out, where you thought I like doing the engineering stuff more than the actual on-air and programming side?
Well, probably. I mean, I was enamored a little bit by some of the formats. You have to remember when I started um, doing the DJing, it was country music, and that was when country music really was not very cool. And so that was not my favorite. And so when I had a chance to go to WAPL, and it was a fledgling album rock station at the time, but it's when we kind of made our reputation. So that was kind of a fun time to be on the air. But there were times I did, I think, a 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift. That was back in the country days, and you remember how long country music records were, about 2 minutes, 2:30 if you were lucky. Um, After 12 hours of that, I said, there's got to be a better way. And so I think, yeah, I was interested in the electronics. I always have been interested in how the electronics helps the people do their job and be more creative and more talented. So that's, I think, kind of when the seed was planted.
So you went from having the 2 stations, so you were at HBY. When did you come back then to WAPL?
Well, actually, what happened was when I went to WHBY in 1978, they were actually in negotiations to buy WAPL. And
Okay.
of course, I thought this was a terrible tragedy that, the two bigger stations in town would become one company. But in the end, it was the best thing that could have happened because then the station had resources. They built a new building, improved the transmission facilities. I had a chance to participate in that as an assistant, and I learned an awful lot in that process. And yes, that sort of started a period of time in the 1980s where those two stations became a market powerhouse. And with that, set the stage for the 1990s when we had the deregulation and the chance to buy more properties. So, really, I had a chance to participate in a lot of the really fun growth of the radio business, um, which I think is a great privilege. And didn't recognize it at the time because it was just a lot more work. And I think, Kevin, I took a page from your book in those days. I did some contract engineering. So I had a chance to work for some of the smaller stations and the religious station in town here. I worked part time for them for many years. Did a little bit of helping a few broadcasters get started. And that was all very gratifying.
Oh, for sure. So you got to live to tell the tale of being part of one group, and then that you left one group, went to another station, and then through an acquisition ended up back in the group and lived to tell the tale. Is that right?
Absolutely right. And the most interesting thing about that is you could not have imagined two more different cultures. And of course, we built a building where both staffs had to exist side by side. Wow, that was really fascinating. You have to remember the WAPL had a poor reputation at that time, and it was an under-equipped station. They were always in the underdog position, always fighting up. Plus, now it had the album rock format on it, which made, I guess, the people that worked that station, let's just say, were all of a certain demographic profile. And we went to, across the street, a news talk MOR station, which was the long established market leader where everyone had to be 50 plus. It was amazing that we didn't kill each other.
Well, that definitely sounds like, and along the way, then you're now up to 11 stations. You said that Woodward owns.
Actually, it's eight primary stations and five translators because we are only in the one market now. We've, in my tenure here, we've been up to four markets, but we divested a number of properties really in the 90s and 2000s. So,
So how was that adapting as the company grew from only having three stations now having so many more stations across? Because now you were covering all the way from Appleton to Green Bay, so you had a lot more geographic territory. What were some of the challenges and in some of that growth that you had to endure?
well, a couple of building expansions. We also assimilated several other stations, so it's bringing other transmitter sites into our realm and then trying to make it compatible with what we were doing. But I don't know, it seemed like it came steady and bite-sized pieces, so it never was overwhelming. We had a couple of times where we bought in another market and we had to bring a station up to standards. Um, and then shortly after, maybe we did get it to a certain point, it was then sold again, which that got to be a little harder because you almost feel like it's your children sometimes. You know, you did a lot of work on the property and all of a sudden you feel like it really is coming along and then they sell it to somebody else.
Yeah, you
But
end up getting personally invested into the project, and
yeah,
I totally know how you feel, and but at the same time, you got to do the fun part, which is you got to rehab it and make and do all the fun work, and then you didn't have to deal with any of the ongoing maintenance issues. You just got to let the other people have it.
well, that is probably true, and that's a good way to look at it. Although I could only think about it like, well, we aren't going to reap the benefits of that hard work, you know. But in the end, all that work exists; it's still out there. And some of my friends, you know, ended up getting some of those stations and taking them further. So it's part of the circle of life broadcast version, you know.
So, at what point did you end up joining to be part of the Broadcasters Clinic Committee? Because you've done that for quite a while. And for those who aren't familiar with the Wisconsin Broadcasters Clinic, it is an incredible regional show that's put on by the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association, and it's held in Middleton, Wisconsin, every year. It happens in usually September or October, but it ends up being a pretty great show for both television and radio broadcasters and draws a number of people. And you've been active with helping put it together every year. How did you get involved with that?
Well, actually, I just was asked to serve on the committee by some of the other committee members. They've advanced my name, and probably pretty much, Kevin, I think you had a tenure on the committee too. Kind of the same way, probably. I thought it was a tremendous honor to be asked. And truthfully, I was really excited to do it because um, I always had attended the clinic since the 70s. And I always felt like it was a mini NAB as far as how much information you could glean from it. And I always came back from those energized. I had talked to a number of other people, swapped stories, sometimes helped them with a problem they had, sometimes they helped me with a problem I had. And I just came back from every one of those clinics just feeling really good about the profession, really honored to be with the kinds of people that were broadcast engineers. And so this I thought was a chance for me to maybe put something into that institution that Don Borchert and others had really developed over the years. And I think that's why I felt honored to be on that committee.
Well, I can tell you, as somebody who served alongside you, it is a lot of fun to be part of that committee and to see how the sausage is made behind the scenes and putting together an event that is attended. How many people does it usually draw? It's usually a couple hundred that come out, isn't
Yeah,
it?
200 to 300, I would say 200 broadcast engineers, and then there's vendors and guests and others who come as well. So now it'll vary a little bit depending on the economy or weird things that happen like COVID, but um, I would say our average is somewhere in that 100 to 200 actual broadcast engineers who come.
Now, if I remember right, during my time on the committee, the long running joke was all of the committee members were really into trains. And were you one of those
Well,
people? I don't remember.
while I respect the train hobby and probably had model trains as a kid, my dad had some. I never was as devoted as some of our train loving members, but I did go with them sometimes to see some of the sites because, well, you couldn't avoid it.
That's true. So, I guess, what are some of the interesting stories or interesting things that came up along the way with the Broadcasters Clinic? Because, like I said, every year it always just seemed to be such a great event. But I guess maybe was there any major highlights along the way that you can think of, or any interesting stories from the committee, or any of the work that you did over the years?
Well, I'll make fun of myself with this one because it's the only thing that jumps to my mind. Because I'd been a long time attendee of the clinic before serving on the committee. And then the year that I joined the planning committee, I did try to help as much as I could, learn a little bit about everything as it was coming together. But in a moment of exuberance, I mean, I thought that the lineup was great, and I think I was upset maybe that I missed as many of the sessions as I missed because a lot of times you have jobs. If you're a committee member, you have to do things. But I think I exclaimed with some glee, "Boy, this is the best clinic ever." Chuck Leonard kind of looked at me with that look that he has and just said, "Well, Steve, this is just the first one you've been involved." So yeah, I think it was a cute moment, and I was suitably embarrassed and got very red. But I do think that all the guys on the clinic committee deserve a lot of credit because they do pour a lot of heart and soul into it. They take it seriously. Um, they love it when the attendees take it seriously and enjoy it. And so I just really feel privileged to have spent some time with them and to be able to help in some small way with the product that is out there.
For sure. And along, not necessarily in conjunction with the Broadcasters Clinic, but you've been involved with the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development to create a youth apprenticeship pathway for media broadcast technicians. And I know that's something you've always really championed throughout your career, is to be a mentor and to provide opportunities for new engineers. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the work you've done in that regard?
Well, I am excited about this opportunity, Kevin, because um, I think we might have been missing the boat. We've tried always very hard. We've had days where we bring in the college students and talk to them. We have job fairs. We do whatever we can to encourage people to choose the profession. But I think the Department of Workforce Development approached us about this idea. And at first we thought, well, high school, that's just too young. But as we thought about it more and more, that really is just right. Because we have to kind of connect with these young people when they're deciding what they want to get involved in. Once they're through 2 to 4 years of college, they've already mapped the plan. And a lot of our related professions, like maybe the on-air performers or even the salespeople, they're probably going through college knowing I want to be an anchor person, or I want to be a news producer, or I want to be a business executive. Um, they, I think it's too late to get the people with the knack, as Dilbert would say. We've got to get them in high school, and we've got to get them excited about what we do. And when they get a chance to see it, they'll self-motivate to get the rest of the steps done. But if we wait until college, unfortunately, a lot of those people are spoken for. So the DWD does this in other professions. They bring along young people, high school age, to be electricians or construction workers, or other kinds of trade work. And we all felt that maybe broadcast engineering has more in common with that than it has in common with, let's say, a journalism degree at a 4-year college. So for that reason, we've decided to start this pathway. And we're really hoping now to get television and radio stations excited about making a position for a apprentice. We have to be careful to use the right language. It's not an intern. This is an apprentice. And the person is paid like an apprentice by the facility. And we have an opportunity to teach them some of the basics of broadcast engineering in an audio or a video environment, and hoping we can convert some of these young people into choosing this as a profession. Let's get some that have the knack and maybe light the fire that we all feel about the business. And I think I remember starting out at the clinic, I was always the young guy. And I always kind of felt like, oh, I'm the young guy. I'm learning all this stuff from these seasoned professionals. And now here I am, you know, years later, and I'm not the young guy anymore. And we're not getting enough of the young guys. And we need to find a way to connect with them. And if we can touch that in some high school settings and just get them exposed to the business, I think we've got a really good chance at turning some of them into broadcast engineers.
Yeah, and what I like about that too is the fact that they're going to bring in kind of a whole new perspective to the way that we do things, because the way that they view broadcast engineering these days doesn't involve a lot of vacuum tubes, or doesn't involve a lot of the things that we've traditionally associated with broadcast engineering. They're going to come in more IT oriented. They're going to come in
Mhm.
basically want to get much more hands-on with the future technology, and that's what's a lot of driving our industry now to change. And so they're going to be able to kind of ride with that and bring a whole new perspective to it. So I like your perspective on that.
Well, I think honestly, it's just going to be a good thing. And if we get this going in Wisconsin, and if we can show maybe other states, hey, there's something here, maybe other states will develop something like this, because I think every state has something like the Department of Workforce Development. They're interested in teaching young people, hey, here's another pathway for your career. There's not just one or two ways to do this.
Was this the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association that had a hand in this too, or was this something that they developed all entirely their own? This development, forgive my exact
Oh, no, that's all
phrasing.
right. The DWD, I think, actually reached out to the Wisconsin Broadcasters
Okay.
Association, and we did recruit a few people from WBA's groups, okay, managers and engineers, and they served on this committee to kind of help develop the program. and DWD sort of guided us with that. And we're still in the very early stages. We don't have enough people out in the stations yet, because I think there are concerns. People say, geez, high school kids, I mean, I'm not going to let them touch my equipment. But the truth is, they start small, just like any of our new employees would start. And we just gradually give them more responsibility to the level they can handle it. And yes, if they are not interested, they end up opting out, they don't finish, or they just finish their term and then they don't do any more. But if we can, let's just say we can touch the chord in half of our applicants, well, that would be a huge success.
Well, what I can tell you is if you're looking at a program like that, I was somebody who came out of a program very, very similar to that. My high school at the time, it was not a state program, but my high school had a mentorship program that would place you into, uh, basically would help get you into places where you had an interest. In my junior year of high school was when I started getting into radio, and I asked to be part of the radio stations in my hometown. And sure enough, they were able to connect me with them. And I was a mentor there. So it was unpaid at the time. But I was there for maybe 3 months. I did some board op, just kind of did some observation and did some very easy work. And then at the end of my mentorship, I said, "Hey, can I get a job?" And they were like, "Yeah, we'd love to have you." And that ended up turning into an actual paid job through the rest of my high school years. And well, that's what my career has
The hook
been
was set.
since then.
Yeah, the hook was set, and that's I think what we're after, because if we have to run through 50 potential apprentices to get one Kevin Trueblood, it's still worth it.
Well, that's nice of you to say. And I was going to ask. So this is a fairly new program. You haven't seen any results just yet, but this is something that you're currently working on.
Yes, it's been out there. I think we announced it maybe 2 years ago or a year ago, so not really enough time yet to get much momentum. But I know that there are several stations, radio and television, who are talking about it, who are engaged with the DWD, and all we have to do is get a few placed, and I think more will follow.
So this is one aspect of it, but they're working with the Wisconsin Broadcast Association for basically any career that's along with broadcasting. So they're looking for journalists. They're looking for basically anybody, or is this specifically, this is the only thing that they want to do is for broadcast engineers?
This pathway is specifically broadcast engineers right now. If it's successful, they could possibly open more. I do think they've got some for graphic designers and other things that are employed by the media. But this particular program, we're putting all our energy to this one.
Gotcha. So in the subsequent years, you gained a whole bunch more stations. What are some of the adventures you've found along the way in managing so many stations? What are the secrets that you found to staying sane and staying organized and trying to keep your head above water? Because a lot of us just feel like with as many stations like you have, some days it can be a challenge, particularly if you're running short staffed.
And I think we all are focused on these challenges and stuff, but I think we have to remember why we chose this work and what is good about it, because you just made me think about the fact that a brief moment after I got married, I was kind of looking at my situation and saying, well, I just need to get a real job now. I've got a family, I've got to provide, you know, it's time for a change. And I did actually seek employment outside of broadcasting, which I did for, it was only 6 months, I'm embarrassed to say. But I did accept a different job. It was working for the city government here as a supervisor in the electrical department. I did it because I felt I had to be responsible. Sometimes we in broadcasting don't um, pay properly. And I think many of us who have started out, you get in a groove and um, perhaps you are not making enough money to live the lifestyle that you want to live. And this happened for me. I mean, starting in broadcasting in the years that I did, you start at minimum wage, right? And it takes a while to build that up. And I'm not the one to go into the office and pound my fist on the table and say I have to have a raise. So I just got a different job. And a couple things happened. One is that I stayed on part-time to help them hire a new person to replace me. And even in 1984, that was not easy. Um, we tried hard, and I had a lot of my friends in here. And um, it ended up of total struggle. The other thing that happened on the other end of it is I went to work, and now I'm in a union environment. And boy, that was different. And the big thing that shocked me is that the clock stopped. When I worked at the radio station, I'd come to work in the morning, and before I knew it, it was 5 o'clock and time to go home. But when I did this other job, it's like, oh, it's 10 o'clock. Oh, it's 10:30. Um, it Time just slowed down, and I knew, oh boy, I think I made a big mistake here, you know. And I gave it my all. I had planned to stay, but the two things converged. One was that we were having such difficulty here finding someone, and the other thing was I knew I had made a mistake. And as much as I wanted to honor my commitment, I said, boy, I don't know if I can do this for the next 30 years. So we ended up coming to terms. The hardest thing I ever had to do is call the boss that hired me and say, I'm going to go back to the radio station. But it was the right thing to do. And I think that's what we have to remember as a challenge. We get frustrated. There's not enough money. There's not enough material. There's not enough time. There's just not enough anything. But we forget why we're in the stations we're in. I miss the people. The people were smart and funny. It's not always that way when you get another job. Um, I missed the action. I was always in the middle of the action. Where was I when the planes hit the Twin Towers? I was here in the newsroom helping them. You know, it, it's just different being in the media. And I think that's why a lot of us do this work. And we forget that. We take that for granted. We get mad about the things that are wrong. We don't remember the things that are right. And if I encourage anybody, just remember that before you make a hasty decision like I did, because you might not have a path back like I did.
Well said. And I think that particularly with your group, having a top 40 station and having a well-regarded rock station in the building probably helped contribute to what is a great environment, because it's like, if it's like any of the rock stations I've ever worked with or any of the younger stations I've ever worked with, they create a fun and unique work environment.
That is absolutely true. And I don't even restrict it to just the rock stations, because the news talk station, the sports station, there's something always going on that you can be interested in or a part of if you want to be.
For sure. I know, for me now, being on the public media side, we take news coverage very seriously. And that's one of the things I always love, is being part of breaking news environments, because you're in the thick of what are huge news events and you get to see what happens behind the scenes. And being on location for prominent news events oftentimes is a lot more boring than you think, because it's
But I
like
know,
I was gonna say, it's like, I think somebody summarized it best, where it's like hours of boredom followed by moments of panic.
yes,
But
exactly.
you look back on it and you think those are great events, and those are the moments that you realize that you wouldn't want to do things any other way. You wouldn't want to do any other career, because this is just too much fun.
It is addicting, and it's fun and it's cool. But the most important thing is you feel like you're doing something for your community. You feel like you're doing a public service. You're part of that. Really, our broadcasting system is amazing if you think about it. I mean, we provide all this entertainment and all this education at no cost to our listeners and viewers. I mean, um, it's kind of the envy of the world. I mean, we see the seamy underbelly of the whole thing, and talk about the problems, but the truth is, it's an amazing system that puts out a product we can really all be proud of every day.
I absolutely agree. And especially being on the technical end of things, there's something rewarding in being able to provide that conduit and be able to provide that entertainment and companionship to people. I know, yeah, we're all groggy and we hate leaving a transmitter site after a trouble call at 2 o'clock in the morning. But at the same time, you're driving away from the site going, yay, that's back on the air because I fixed that. Like, how cool is
That's right.
that?
And what a great song.
Exactly. So now, after your many years of service, you are your years of service to the Broadcasters Clinic, to the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association, to the SBE, which you've been involved in your local chapter. You have served as the chapter chair a few times over, right?
That is correct. Actually, I was very fortunate to be here at the founding of our chapter in 1981. A couple of individuals, we got together and kind of said, we all get together and eat lunch once a month. Why don't we do something with that? Let's make that an SBE thing. And shortly after that, we knew the Green Bay guys were also trying to get restarted. And so it just seemed to be a natural time to get a chapter going. And I have to say, I'm just so proud of the members of our chapter. We're so fortunate to have a lot of dedicated people willing to serve in the offices and do the work needed to really give a good environment for a lot of our engineers. And some of our companies support the chapter tremendously. Some of the companies we're still working with, and they don't see the value. But and I'm sure that's true in every SBE market around the country. But I just feel so grateful for our guys who um, are just some of the finest examples of broadcast engineers that I could hope to be associated with.
Well, I think you've joined the ranks now that you're officially an SBE fellow. And by the way, I'm reading the comments from Jim Ragsdale, from Hal Hotstetler, from Wayne Pacina, all saying congratulations, and certainly a well-deserved honor to join the ranks. And another one that just came in from an M jury that says, "Congrats, Steve. It's an honor to have him as a founder and continued member of Chapter 80." So we were just talking about that. So yeah, a very well-deserved honor for you, as it sounds like you're preparing for the future of career. What's coming for you down the pike?
Well, I think I'll always be a little bit involved, certainly with SBE, but also with my former employer if they choose to have me, either in a part-time role or a consultant's role or just hanging around drinking coffee role or whatever it takes. But I guess I'm looking forward to slowing it down just a little bit. Anybody who does this job knows the level of commitment that it takes to do a good job. And I think my wife is ready for me to maybe not have quite so much of a commitment level, um, but maybe I can still kind of come on an afternoon a week or something and harass people a little bit. Um, Maybe spend some time with some of my hobbies that have not had much exercise over the last 40 years. It's all frightfully related to my work, unfortunately, but it's stuff I enjoy doing, um, kind of vintage hi-fi stuff. I've got some antique radios that I need to restore and get going again, and I've got sort of a bizarre fascination with mechanical radio automation systems, which people have made fun of me about over the years. Stuff like that. I think I'll have plenty to do.
Yeah, so we're definitely reaching the end of when you'll have to have your phone by you at all times, and I can't even imagine what that's going to be like to be able to turn your phone off at night and not panic. Are you prepared
That
for
is going
that?
to feel really weird. It's going to feel really strange. I know. So
I'm
I'm
going to go ahead and
lucky.
tell you
I
guys, it's wonderful. It's really wonderful.
will
Well,
take your word for it, Chris.
Chris, you came in at a good time, because I was going to transition talking about the SBE Fellows program, because now he joins a very distinguished list of folks who have contributed quite a bit to the broadcast engineering community. And Steve, you certainly fit the qualifications to a T, and that's why you were named an SBE Fellow. So what I wanted to get from Chris was, what exactly are the qualifications and how people become fellows?
Well, that's a good thing to mention. The SBE Fellow is it's the highest recognition the SBE offers to our members, and it's awarded only to those nominated by members, and they are elected to the position by the board of directors. The board considers the nominations in the spring when we meet at the NAB. They meet at the NAB show usually, and vote on the candidate. It's usually one, sometimes two a year. In general, fellow members of the SBE have rendered conspicuous service or have made valuable contributions to the advancement of broadcast engineering or its allied professions. I think you and I, Kevin, can agree that Steve has certainly met those criteria. They're proposed in writing by any voting member. The nomination includes a cover letter, a biography of the nominee, and it's endorsed by at least 5 other voting members of the SBE. It's all done in confidence, so Steve didn't know anything about this, and there are several guilty parties who were good enough to keep it all under their hats and keep it quiet during the entire process, so that it was a surprise when he was called about the 3rd week in April last month. Steve, I understand you were a little bit speechless when you got the phone call. I won't say more than that.
Speechless is an understatement. First you think it's a gag, of course, then you just don't know what to say. And I finally told him thank you, and I just felt humbled by the whole thing.
I understand.
By the way,
Suncast, I was going to say, Suncast, I think you have a couple of slides. There are 83 individuals who've been elevated to the rank of SBE Fellow, and we got 2 slides that show those names. These are, I believe, alphabetical order. Some of these individuals are no longer with us. A few Wisconsinians, is that Wisconsinites? What's the proper term? Are in this
I
list,
think either
like
works.
Terry Bond and Jim Woolleman are among your fellow fellows. I'm proud to say I was elected fellow as well. So welcome to the crowd. I'll say it that way.
Thank you very much. Like I said, I still can't shake the feeling that there's probably about 200 other broadcast engineers that would deserve this more, but I am grateful
We'll
and
get to 'em.
humbled by the honor. There you go.
There's always time. By the way, Linda Bond says that you're going to continue serving on the broadcast clinic committee. So whether you want to or not, you're going to continue it because Linda wants you to.
In the
She
words
has
of
a
Linda,
term.
you've been voluntold.
There you go. I was going to go there myself. We'll have to have another chat with Linda.
Well, terrific. Well, congratulations again, Steve. It's been wonderful to talk to you this afternoon. And again, a well-deserved honor, and we are all very proud of you. And thank you for everything you've done for the broadcast engineering community.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
All right. Well, Chris, we'll turn things over to you to finish up and just wanted to say thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And thanks, Steve, for being here. Hey, this has been the SBE WEBxtra, the SBE chapter of the web. We present it monthly. We hope you'll join us each time. We'll post the replay on our YouTube channel very soon. By the way, if you hold SBE certification, viewing the SBE WEBxtra qualifies you for 1/2 point in category G. That's in attendance. It's just like attending a local chapter meeting. If you have an idea for a topic or a guest for the SBE WEBxtra, send it to us by email at webextra@sbe.org. And that does it for this installment of the SBE WEBxtra for May from the Society of Broadcast Engineers, the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals. Thanks and congratulations once again to our guest, Steve Brown. And on behalf of Kevin Trueblood, we'll see you next month.